Good evening. Welcome to the February 5th, 2024 Troy City Council meeting. We're honored this evening to have Reverend Myra Moreland from the Troy First United Methodist Church here to provide our invocation. So please rise for that invocation and then remain standing for our Pledge of Allegiance.
Divine Creator, we gather here tonight, leaders and laborers, citizens of Troy and citizens of the world. We come together to work toward a community that flourishes. We ask you to guide us, to help us to be ambassadors of love, to help us to care for one another, and especially for those who need extra care. Please show us the way to be better stewards of all of the many blessings that you have given to this community and to the abundance, the wonderful and beautiful abundance of this earth. May we work together as one voice toward a world that is at peace, toward a community that is growing and thriving. In the name of all that is sacred and holy, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will call the February 5th, 2024 Troy City Council meeting to order and ask for the roll call from Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Brooks?
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Krenga?
Here.
Councilmember Chanda?
Here.
Councilmember Gunn?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoderick?
I did receive, we do have a quorum present this evening. I did receive notification from Mayor Pro Tem Hoderick that she would be out of the county this evening, so I'll move resolved that the Troy City Council hereby excuses the absence of Mayor Pro Tem Ellen Hoderick at the regular City Council meeting of February 5th, 2024 due to being out of the county.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain-Krenga that we approve the absence of, excuse the absence of Mayor Pro Tem Ellen Hoderick as read into the record. Any discussion? Vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Krenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Motion carries. We have no certificates of recognition and special presentations this evening. We have no carryover items, no public hearings. I do not see that anybody has signed up for public comment for items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. I take that back. Looks like someone just signed up. Is Nadia Hawk here? Are you a Troy resident? Yes. And are you speaking on an item on the agenda this evening? Okay, you should sign up under L then. That said, there's no need, nobody signed up for public comment for items on the agenda this evening from Troy residents and businesses, so no need for council response or reply. No postponed items, so we move on to regular business. First up, I-1, board and committee appointments, mayoral appointments. I do have a couple of them. I'd like to move the appointment of Karen Greenwood to the Board of Review for the term expiring January 31st, 2027.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain-Krenga that we approve the appointment of Karen Greenwood to the Board of Review for the term expiring January 31st, 2027. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Krenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes, motion carries, and we thank Ms. Greenwood for her continued service. That concludes mayoral appointments this evening. We move on to city council appointments. I'll turn it over to Councilmember Hamilton to move the council appointments.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the reappointment to the Election Commission of Steven Sadler and Ray Watts for the terms expiring January 31st, 2025.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Chanda, that we approve the reappointments of Steven Sadler and Ray Watts to the Election Commission for the terms expiring January 31st, 2025. Any discussion? Vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig-A?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Motion carries, and again, we thank them for their continued service. Councilmember Hamilton?
All right, I'll move the reappointment of Councilmember Teresa Brooks to the Employee Retirement Systems Board of Trustees, the Retiree Health Care Benefits Plan and Trust, and Volunteer Firefighter Incentive Plan Board for the term expiring with her city council term.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain Craig-A, that we approve the reappointment of Councilmember Teresa Brooks to the Employees Retirement System Board of Trustees, Retiree Healthcare Benefits Plan and Trust, Volunteer Firefighter Incentive Plan for the term that expires at the end of her city council term. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig-A?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you for your continued service on that board.
And finally, I'll move the reappointment of Abhi Swaminathan to the Traffic Committee for the term expiring January 31st, 2027.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Brooks, that we approve the reappointment of Abhi Swaminathan to the Traffic Committee for the term expiring January 31st, 2027. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig-A?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Motion carries. That concludes city council appointments this evening. Next up, I2, board and committee nominations. I have no mayoral nominations this evening, so I'll turn it back over to Councilmember Hamilton for city council nominations.
Thank you, Mayor. To the Zoning Board of Appeals, I'd like to move the renomination of Barbara Chambers and Jeffrey Forster as alternates for the terms expiring January 31st, 2025.
Support.
Those are one-year terms, right? Are the alternate city attorney or city clerk, or are the alternate one-year terms or three-year terms?
We have 3-year terms on there. We don't have I don't see a differentiation between the alternate term and the regular member term.
Okay, I'll say, I'll move renomination of Barbara Chambers and Jeffrey Forster as alternates for the terms expiring January 31st, 2027 for the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Chanda, that we approve the renomination of Barbara Chambers and Jeffrey Forster as the alternates to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the terms expiring January 31st, 2027. Any discussion? We'll say that does, the agenda isn't printed correctly. It has different names. I'm just making sure that those expiration dates are correct. We can always amend when we do the appointment, or the appointments at the next meeting, but
Maybe
should we hold off?
I'm sorry, excuse me. We have a lot of boards in my office, so I'm not, maybe the city attorney or somebody could help me out.
Mayor, they are 3-year terms because they are alternates, so it would be consistent with the other terms for the zoning board of appeals.
Okay, then that's fine. All right. The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig-A?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Motion carries. That concludes city council nominations this evening for boards and committees. We move on. There's no request for closed session on I3, so we move on to I4, amendments to Troy City Code, Chapter 93, Fire Prevention, and that'll be introduced by our Fire Chief Pete Hollinger.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Actually, I'm going to have the Fire Marshal, Deputy Chief Kohler, do the introduction to this.
Good evening, Council. The proposal before you is to update Chapter 93, our Fire Prevention Code. The primary change in this update is to go from our current adopted fire code, which is the International Fire Code 2015 edition, to the 2021 edition. The main reason for this change is there's a lot of industries and processes that are more prevalent now in the city than they were when 2015 was adopted. So there's some more rules and regulations that help ensure the safe operation of these businesses.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Any questions from council? Councilmember Gunn.
So what is exactly the change that you're, I've read it, but what are you changing?
So the addition of the International Fire Code. So currently, we have adopted the 2015 International Fire Code, and this would be going to a newer edition, which is the 2021 International Fire Code.
Which is the lithium ion batteries that we were talking about?
So there's several industries and processes that are addressing that, but energy storage systems is a main one. There's 3D printing, there's the distilleries, things that are becoming a little bit more prevalent, the mobile food
Gotcha.
trucks and mobile fueling of vehicles, those types of things.
Got it.
Thank you. Any additional questions? I know some were asked earlier today in writing, but. Someone like to move the nomination?
Support.
Councilmember Gunn, you want to move it?
Yeah. I move.
To read.
Okay,
gotta say it.
go ahead. I thought you already did it. Go first.
First one, we'll let you do it if you want to do it.
No.
Let's do it.
All right, where are we at here? I move that Chapter 93, Fire Prevention, introduce, we move.
Fair enough, we'll work through that.
As printed on the agenda.
That's printed in the agenda packet?
Yeah,
Just say it.
I-4.
Okay, there we go. Support. Moved by Councilmember Gunn, supported by Councilmember Hamilton, that we approve I-4, amendments to Troy City Code, Chapter 93, Fire Prevention, as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is I-5, Standard Purchasing Resolution Number 1, Award to Low Bidder and Budget Amendment, Contract 23-11, Stevenson Highway Rehabilitation. That'll be introduced by Scott Finley, our city engineer.
Evening, Mayor, City Council. The item here before you is a standard purchasing resolution for the mill and overlay of Stevenson Road, 14 mile to I-75. We budgeted $4.2 million for it. It came in a little bit over budget. Budgets typically have contingencies, inspection, and testing included within the budgets. So the budget amendment is to cover those contingencies and inspections that are exceeding the budget. We bid this project a little earlier in the year, and asphalt prices were 30% higher than they were last year. We rebid it, and it came in still 20% higher. So this is probably going to be a theme moving forward that our dollars are going to go less down the road.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Chanda.
Just, I see, the bid that we choose is significantly lower than the other ones, right? So one question is, what kind of private experience do you have with this vendor? Like, I know in terms of timing, are they committed
Yes,
to?
Proline has done other work in the city. They've worked for the county. They just finished John R. Road on the county. They did our Beach Road mill and overlay last season, so they're very experienced. They did all of Waddles Road's overlays, so they're a very experienced contractor here in the city. One other thing that the DPW director wanted me to mention was that with this budget amendment, our overall street major roads funds would come down to less than $1 million. The importance of that, we are in Michigan, so if it started to snow every day, we could run out of money.
Good, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Councilmember Chamberlain
But it's going to be
Craig.
50 degrees this week.
Yeah.
A quick question. Was this the same Stevenson Highway project that we submitted for an earmark for? Was that?
Yes, correct.
And we didn't receive it, it looks like.
It gets submitted for $500,000, but it's in Washington, and this is politics season, so whether or not that bill gets through, but it is in there, and if the bill does get passed, then we'll have $500,000 coming back towards it.
Any other questions? Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move I-5 Standard Purchasing Resolution Number 1, Award to Low Bidder and Budget Amendment, Contract 23-11 Stevenson Highway Rehabilitation as printed in the agenda.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Brooks, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain Craig, that we approve I-5 Standard Purchasing Resolution Number 1, Award to Low Bidder and Budget Amendment, Contract 23-11 Stevenson Highway Rehabilitation, as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? Councilmember Hamilton.
Just to residents who are watching this meeting and looking at this agenda, these kind of expenditures are something that we plan for on a very long term. In our budget, in our annual budget, we have a 6-year capital plan where we budget each year to get these repairs done to kind of balance out how much we spend each year. It doesn't always work out, but we try the best we do. So this is one of the biggest road purchases we will do this year, but we plan long term for this, and it's within our budget, and we're ready to go. So I'll be supporting it.
I also actually just wanted to add, even if it did snow every day, we'll find some money this year to make sure our roads are plowed and salted. So not to worry, but that is good information for long-term thinking about our finances. So thank you. Anything else? The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes. Motion carries. Starts in the spring, so be ready over there. That concludes regular business. Next up is the consent agenda. Would anyone like to pull an item from the consent agenda for further discussion? Councilmember Hamilton?
I'll move all items on the consent agenda as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Brooks, that we approve all items on the consent agenda as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? Vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Motion carries. If you're here for an item on the consent agenda this evening, they all have been approved. Next up are memorandums and future council agenda items. We have no K1 announcement of public hearings, but we do have a K2 memorandum amendment to Chapter 98 of the Criminal Code. City Attorney Bloom?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Again, this is an informational item, and absent any major concerns from council, we will be bringing it back as an action item. So again, it's kind of a first reading. So if you have any questions or concerns, we're happy to address those.
Thank you. All right, next up is public comment for items not on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. We do have a handful of people signed up this evening. When I call your name, please come forward, state your name, state your residential address in the city of Troy or the business that you own in Troy, and then you have 3 minutes to speak to us as a whole. It's not a back and forth conversation. As a reminder, the rules are printed in our agenda packet and our council rules of procedure as well. At the end of the 3 minutes, at 2 minutes, the yellow light will come on. You'll have 1 minute left. When it turns red, the time is up, and you will be asked to conclude your comments at that time. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So first up is Zahra Ahmed. All right. Next up is Bilal Ahmad. All right, that takes us to Amina Ahmed. Okay, Rita Khan.
Hello, Mayor and council members. Today I'm here to address you on your current responsibility to introduce and pass a ceasefire resolution. No matter how sick you are of hearing public comments from your constituents waiting for this annoyance in your regular schedule to pass, it will not until you pass a ceasefire resolution, which requires you to introduce it to the agenda first. Supporters of a ceasefire are not ignorant to the necessity that city councils pass their resolutions because state and government bodies are consistently failing democracy, and so your responsibility in this matter is necessary. We are also not ignorant of the fact that any rules you may have established regarding commenting on international affairs, just as easily as you decided on this cowardly rule as the international is inextricable from the national and local, you can easily make the same decision and make an exception or reverse it for a dire purpose like supporting a ceasefire. If this change to your procedure is not acceptable to you, then I further argue that it is ignorant to label the ceasefire movement as an international topic. Yes, Gaza and Palestine are in another continent, yet the missiles hitting them are US born and bred. This genocide is commonly known as the U.S.-Israeli aggression. We are in the name because of how involved we are as a country. There is nothing international about the percentage of tax dollars Troy citizens are being taken from their residents going towards the opposite of a ceasefire. A ceasefire resolution would be the absolute least motion a city council could make in this matter. Finally, another one of the mayor's points is that there is a controversy surrounding this and potential lashback that this might create. Regarding the controversy, I did not vote for my council members to be spineless and complicit in the face of injustice. Unfortunately, yet expectedly and obviously, taking the stance against a genocide on the severely dehumanized Arab population of Palestinians with full U.S. support and by Israel is controversial. The only reason these types of atrocities exist is because there are people and, more importantly, government organizations existing who support them. I would hope you do not seek to please a group cheering on violence and instead support the group standing against it. Part of your job is, or at least should be, standing up in the face of opposition when the time calls for it. Finally, a lot of Troy residents expressed their justified feelings surrounding the violence in Gaza, and the mayor stated that a ceasefire resolution might make us feel good, but that's all it will do. Both of us are trying to strategize around our positions, but ultimately, none of our personal feelings toward a ceasefire will mean anything until there actually is one, which has to be widely agreed upon by people in the United States, which requires city councils to introduce and pass ceasefire resolutions. Please put the topic of a ceasefire on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. As a reminder, our rules do not allow for applause, so please, no applause. Thank you. Next up is Zara Ahmad.
Hello, Council. So first, I'm going to read a statement from a resident that cannot be here today. So my name is Ian Watson. I'm a resident of Troy, and I'm having my statement read for me because I'm currently living in Marquette to study at Northern Michigan University. I urge the city of Troy to approve a ceasefire resolution to strengthen international pressure against Israel following the ruling of the International Court of Justice. The city of Troy is failing its Palestinian residents, the people of Gaza, and the international community. This is the first time in history that a genocide has been aired live on social media, yet the world is showing a disgusting lack of sympathy. Take a stand for human rights and pass a ceasefire resolution. Okay, now on my behalf. Good evening, Council. I'm speaking as a resident of Troy. Mayor Baker, I am disappointed in your response from last week. We have heard accounts from countless residents outlining the horrors of the ongoing U.S.-funded Israeli aggression. I want to respond to 2 points you made at the last council meeting when this issue was brought up. One was about a ceasefire statement taking a side and angering the other half of Troy. The other was thinking that the statement is not going to do anything and we're all going to go home and be reminded of the situation again. Honestly, I would have rather heard you say that you would like to play it safe because these reasons are just not the situation. So first, you said you didn't want to anger the other half of Troy. But what is this other half? The other half that supports a genocide? The International Court of Justice has ruled that Israel is committed genocide in Palestine, so there's no doubt about this. Our tax money, U.S. tax dollars, are actively going to support this aggression. So governments at all levels are already actively taking a side, one of violence and genocide. And not challenging this is not the right thing to do. And to the point of a ceasefire resolution being a mere token statement to make us feel better, this is also a tall claim. We're not doing it to make us feel better. We're doing it so that people around the world can stop dying. The council should know better than anyone, most of all, that the voice of the city of Troy does matter and it will be heard. I think you know that, a resolution like that will make waves because we are challenging the wrongs of our government. And again, a ceasefire is just a peaceful solution, stopping violence on all sides, stopping innocent killings. And when cities make statements, this pressures the nation, which then ultimately pressures, our government and can actually make a change. So Mayor Baker, again, you are in a position to actually make a change and to be a justice trailblazer. Please do not believe that your voice doesn't matter, and please join countless other cities in Michigan and around the nation calling for a peaceful solution. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Next up is Kudsia Is it Ione or Loan? I can't remember. Loan, thank you.
Salam, shalom, peace. I'm Qudsi Alon, a mother of two and a business analyst by profession. I'm a member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and Troy has been my home since 2010. So this is my second visit here, seeking this council to introduce and pass a ceasefire resolution to stop the genocide in Gaza, which our government is funding with our tax dollars. In the last meeting, Mayor Baker, you responded that this ask is beyond the scope of what a city council does. Though I understand that to a degree, I see many instances indicating otherwise. For example, ceasefire resolutions have been passed by other U.S. cities regarding this very conflict, the most recent and prominent one in Chicago. Secondly, like Troy, City of Farmington Hills and Oakland County City had also passed a resolution in 2005 preventing its city council from taking any stance on foreign affairs. Yet on March 21st, 2022, without changing the restriction added in 2005, the city issued a proclamation that the City of Farmington Hills stands in solidarity with Ukraine. In fact, in 2022, cities across America, including Troy, stood in solidarity with Ukraine and condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Granted, it was before Troy had added the restriction regarding foreign affairs, the point being, just 2 years ago, this provision was exactly part of the proclamations and congratulatory certification section of this very city's agenda. So what we're asking is nowhere near politically charged as condemning any country, as was done by the President of the United States Conference of Mayors in 2022. We're simply asking our City Council to ask both parties to a ceasefire so the daily carnage of human life can stop. There's no downside to asking for this, and there's plenty of precedents. Rest assured, even after the bombing stops, their wounds will continue to bleed and hurt. The limbs will remain amputated. The orphans will remain orphaned. The humanitarian aid will take its good time to reach them. Their towns will remain as piles of rubble, and many will continue to die of injury, starvation, and disease. So there is no danger that our executive, congressional, and Senate leaders and their allies won't be able to continue to satiate their bloodlust, watching the ongoing wretched condition of Palestinians for months and years to come. I implore you to please do what you need to do to send this message on our behalf that we demand peace. Actual peace with a ceasefire, not the euphemism we use to destroy nations. As for those of your constituents who oppose this, there will always be people who oppose peace. This demand is not just from the Arabs or the Muslims. Over 60% of Americans, including Jewish people from both the liberal and the religious sectors, support the call for a ceasefire. Please take a stand on the right side of history. Please at least put this discussion about the ceasefire on the agenda so we can start to talk about it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Loan. Please, no applause. Sorry, it's not in our rules, folks. Next up, Barb Yegley.
Good evening. You've already heard what I have to say because you've read it in your emails, but I'm going to read it for the benefit of the community here. I wanted to thank you for standing firm on the policy against issuing resolutions on U.S. foreign policy or conflicts in other countries. The sufferings of children are always compelling and should evoke great compassion. And I suppose a reminder that the Israelis' military goal is to eliminate Hamas, who initiated the current carnage by murdering and abducting Israeli children and other civilians, would, of course, probably be unsatisfactory to our grieving neighbors. So you are wise and considered to refrain from using it as a reason for your silence. However, my reasons for speaking twice on this matter are rooted in my childhood experience of finding old newspapers detailing the discovery of the Nazi death camps during the final days of World War II. My grandmother kept them for years in a dresser drawer. The pictures of these emaciated victims had more impact on her and on me than even VE Day, and they certainly left a deep impression on me. In the aftermath of the Nazi final solution attempt, the nations of the world almost unanimously agreed that the Jews needed their own homeland. I find it unnerving to hear from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, because there is no room for the Jews in this Palestine, whereas there has been room for Palestinians in Israel, although they identify themselves as Arab Israelis. and they're about 20% of the population. When I visited Israel in 2014 and 2016, I encountered some of them, along with Druze, in the Galilee area. The area seemed quite prosperous and peaceful. I'm grateful that you recognize your roles as unifiers of our Troy community and didn't fall into the trap of taking sides in a conflict which has stymied the greatest peacemakers of our time. Somehow in our diverse community, we must strive to nurture our goodwill towards each other. We can be examples to the rest of the world. It would be a sad day indeed if the Troy community and its city council supported any action that would suggest that Israel had no right to exist, which is how the ceasefire resolutions are being interpreted. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hagley. Next up is Kathleen O'Laughlin.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor Baker. I just wanted to say that I've been coming to Troy City Council meetings for about a year now, and because I'm interested in what goes on in Troy. But lately, the last couple of meetings has been, I've had to sit here for 2 hours waiting for people that are just talking about things that don't belong to, that don't involve Troy. So anyway, I just wanted to say I wanted to thank you for all standing up for against that. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about. I just saw the fall of Minneapolis the other day, and among other things, I think that what the Troy City Council ought to do is voice some support for our police department. The police department was totally abandoned in Minneapolis, and I don't want to see that happen here in Troy. The fires, the lack of support, leadership was horrible. So anyway, I just want to have a resolution or something about the police department, that the Troy City Council does support our police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Laughlin. Next up is Joey Colby.
Well, I am actually here for totally different issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Joey Colby, a resident of 5125 Shady Creek Drive, and I want to address an urgent issue that we as a community must come together to address: homelessness in Troy. Last week, I had the privilege of participating in the point-in-time count alongside organizations like Kensington Church, Lighthouse, and the Alliance for Housing. This annual event allows us to take stock of the individuals and families experiencing homelessness, whether sheltered or unsheltered, those in transitional housing, or those seeking refuge in safe havens on a single night. Homelessness is a problem that affects not just Troy, but it also plagues cities and towns throughout Southeast Michigan. Furthermore, the number of people who were homeless for the first time increased 30% between the years of 2020 to 2022. I respectfully ask Mayor Baker and the City Council to please take the immediate action of doing two essential things. Acknowledge homelessness as a pressing problem in Troy. It is imperative that we first acknowledge that homelessness exists within our community. Denial serves no one, and it is only through recognition that we can begin to find solutions. The second is the establishment of a temporary exploratory committee. I propose the creation of an exploratory committee that would be dedicated to finding sustainable and cost-effective ways to humanely address homelessness in Troy. This committee should have the following objectives: gather data and understanding, development of a cost-effective and sustainable approach, and the pursuit of grant funding. There are a lot of ways to gather data, and if the city would be willing to collaborate with local organizations such as the Chaldean Charities of America, Chaldean Community Foundation, the Gary Bernstein Community Health Clinic, and Honor Community Health, Lighthouse, Oakland, Livingston Human Service Agency, and the Centro Multicultural La Familia would be vital to get this data. Obviously, it's not politically feasible to use tax dollars to address homelessness in the city, and I recognize that, but there are a number of federal organizations that do provide grants that the city can tap into and use with data, and there are solutions to this. We could look at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. So obviously my time is running out. Homelessness is an incredibly complex issue, and there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But there's obviously things like the pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes for housing, and I just say we have a responsibility as a city and a community to address it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Colby. Next up is Iman Mansour.
Good evening, council members. My name is Iman. I have been a resident of Troy since 2015. I went to Troy High, and I currently work as a part-time substitute in Troy schools and the surrounding districts. I'm speaking here today to ask you to add discussing a ceasefire to the agenda for future council meetings. I will not go into details about the atrocities that are happening in Gaza right now, as I imagine that by now you are all well aware of the situation. But I would like to tell you how this affects me directly as a resident of Troy. Firstly, I'm appalled by our country's response to the situation. The U.S. continues to support Israel despite their violent actions. President Joe Biden claimed to have personally seen evidence of 40 beheaded babies, which was later proven to never have occurred. The U.S. was one of only 10 countries to vote against a ceasefire in the UN General Meeting that happened last December. These are just a few examples. Additionally, last night the Senate released a bill that will send $14.1 billion to Israel. This is taxpayer money that could be used to fund public institutions such as our schools and libraries, or could be used towards student loan debt, or universal health care, or housing for the homeless. Instead, we are funding more military weapons and supplies for Israeli settlers to bomb more Palestinian men, women, and children, and turn their bodies, their homes, their land, and their limbs into rubble. This is money derived from taxes that I pay, that are deducted from my paycheck, from income that I earn. If this doesn't affect me directly, I frankly don't know what does. The actions of our federal government are, of course, not within your control. However, as the City Council, it is your responsibility to represent the voices and concerns of your residents. I also plan on applying to medical school this summer, and I currently volunteer at a free clinic in Detroit. As someone who is involved in the medical field, I am deeply concerned for the state of the healthcare system in Gaza, which has nearly collapsed due to Israel's bombing of the hospitals, which may add as a war crime according to the Geneva Convention. I'm minored in global health. Overcrowding in hospitals, in addition to the many dead bodies being scattered in the streets of Palestine in Gaza, creates a breeding ground for the spreading of infectious diseases, which we now know can quickly become a global issue. According to the WHO, if the health system in Gaza is not repaired very soon, more people could begin to die from disease than from actual bombings. The city of Troy consists of a very diverse population with families that come from various different ethnic, cultural, and religious backgrounds, and this is one of our strengths. While this should be obvious, I want to emphasize here that speaking up in support of Palestinians is in no way anti-Semitic. The allies and advocates for Palestine include many Jewish individuals who recognize the stark parallels between what Israel is doing now to Palestinians and what was done before to their own people. Palestinians are an occupied people and therefore have the right to resist. I implore you to look back on previous cases of apartheid and genocide, and to also look to the future and consider that 20, 40, or 60 years from now, when we look back upon this moment, who will we label as right versus wrong? Council members, I hope you'll choose to be on the right side of history and support a ceasefire. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Ismail Mansour.
Good evening. My name is Ismail Mansour. I am a 5th grader at Martell Elementary. I am 11 years old. I've been a Troy resident since I was 3 years old. I love my home here, but these days I don't feel so good about my country supporting Israel. I have been wondering, don't we all know that Adam was the first person on earth and we are all generations down from him? Doesn't that mean we are all related like cousins? In this case, Israel is killing their own relatives. Who would even think of doing such a thing? Everybody is related to the people of Palestine, and why would they kill them? And the people are innocent. Why are they bombing such a small country? They're destroying the old Qibla, a house of God. Something needs to be done. Everybody who can see the right from wrong are doing their best not to buy from companies that support the killing, such as Starbucks, Nike, McDonald's, and the North Face, naming just a few. However, that's not enough. If you support us in this, then actually they might stop the killing and the bombing of innocent people. I have learned that this has been going on for more than 70 years. I hope it is resolved soon. It really hurts me that it's taking so long to put an end to genocide. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Nadia Haq.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sign it.
Okay. Adam Haq? Neither of you? You were just signing as present. I got you. All right. Sarwat Siddiqui.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a Troy resident since 2000, 24 years, paying taxes. Last year, I paid $21,000 to the Troy on a tax, and also federal about $30,000 last year. And I'm talking on the behalf of the community. So this is more for the community side. We fully understand that as a city council, there are constraints on taking a stance on international matters such as Israel and Palestinian conflicts. However, we also recognize that many members of our community are deeply affected by these events. The pain and the concerns are real. In the context, we believe that the city can play a vital role. It is not about intervening in the foreign policy, but about showing support and understanding for those us who are hurting. By acknowledging these feelings, facilitating, communicating, dialogue, and reinforcing our shared values of compassion and empathy, we can contribute positively. The approach aligns our commitment to being supportive, inclusive, and empathetic community. It is about standing with our residents during challenging times, offering a space for healing and understanding irrespective of the global complexities beyond our direct control. So my request to the city that please listen to the voice of the community. Even if you look, the 75% of this, if you ask them to raise the hand, they will support more than 75% to pass the resolution. So I request to please consider again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up for public comment for items not on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. As an opportunity for City Council or City Administration to respond or reply. Councilmember Gunn.
I will respond. First, I feel I've listened the last 2 weeks, and I understand the pain that you feel for everything happening in Palestine and Gaza. You know, I come from a heritage that also has been suppressed greatly. And I support the Troy's position, but I would say to you, I've seen some very, very good efforts the last 2 weeks. And first I want to address, number one, I've heard taxes brought up a lot. The taxes that you pay Troy stay in Troy. The payroll taxes are the ones going to fund the things that you're upset about. If your efforts were put forth at the leadership that are supporting this, or that you want to change, would be your congressmen and U.S. senators. If you guys put forth that same effort, that's where the change will occur. Us voting for this in these cities across the state, it doesn't affect them. It's the congressmen and the U.S. senators. And if you really put forth that effort, maybe that's where you would see the change. You know, that's my opinion, so.
Thank you, Councilmember Gunn. Anyone else? I speak and then it comes back. I understand that's the way it works. But just a couple of quick notes about some of these things. First, you know, most of us up here did speak at the January 8th meeting regarding this when it was first brought to our attention. So I don't want anyone to think at our last meeting on the 26th that I was the only one that spoke because I was silencing anybody on this council. They were all given the opportunity to speak. They are anytime. And I just want to make that very clear. And I urge you to go back and watch that January 8th meeting as well on our YouTube channel in the archive if you're looking for comments from some of the other council members. Again, the passion that comes to this council chamber for the pain that you're feeling as Troy residents is what pulls my heartstrings. This is the third meeting that this happened, not to mention the emails, the other phone calls I've received, and the residents I've talked to. And I do continue to understand exactly why you're here, and we are the most accessible form of government, and I understand the arguments that you feel that we can influence the policymakers that actually can make a difference. Like Councilmember Gunn said, you know, the focus should be on those federal lawmakers, and I understand why it's easier to come here and why you feel a closeness to this body of government. And I hear you so loudly and so clearly when you're asking for us to support just your feelings and how you're feeling, regardless of what's going on overseas, but how it's affecting you here in the city of Troy. And I do, and we've spoken at length over I'm in my 9th year up here, and we've spoken a lot from the council table about how different things have affected our residents and how we support all of our residents, and whether they come from differing views, whether it's religious or cultural backgrounds, how we support everyone coming together here in the city of Troy. And when one group of our community is hurting, that affects all of us. So there's no question that all of our community hurts when you as Troy residents are hurting. And I feel like I shouldn't have to say that because we've said it so much, but I want to make it clear that is a feeling of the city of Troy. And I thought a lot about this since our last meeting. If you were here last meeting, you saw how many people were here and you felt the experience. It was a much longer night than I think tonight's going to be. And, you know, I do stand by what was said at that last meeting and the rules we have in place. I do believe that, like I said, and like Councilmember Gunn has said, and most have said prior to this, the place to channel your commitment and your constant pressure is on the elected officials that actually do control the tax dollars doing what you are trying to get changed. And I know, you know, for the city of Troy, it's Congresswoman Haley Stevens. I did speak to her about this. I saw her this weekend at an event. You know, I don't know if any of you were here this evening, but she was at our Martin Luther King Day of Service at Athens High School, and there was I don't want to say an issue because that sounds a little bit tough, but there was a discussion there with some Troy residents, and I understand, I think I see you nodding over there, I understand the difficulty you're facing in trying to move that needle. I'll say that. And I hope you understand that when I say, and I don't think I said it would upset the other half of Troy. My goal and point is, if we're doing a resolution that upsets even a small group of residents in the city of Troy, we're doing something outside the scope of what I think we should be doing. I don't think it's a half and half issue. I hear the stats about who calls or the amount of support for a ceasefire and everything, and I fully understand that. I read the articles, I see the polls, I see the opinion pieces on it. I still stand by it's not what our council is tasked with doing. I'll stand with my residents every day of the week in supporting their pain and trying to help them through a difficult time, but that's where it has to stop for me as the mayor of this city. I can't then continue into trying to draft words that are going to potentially alienate other groups of residents or cause a muddling of what our primary purpose here is. So I know that's difficult and that's not what you want to hear, and that's the least favorite part of doing this job, is telling people that what they don't want to hear, but it's a reality of how I'm tasked with this job, and I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your composure and your decorum and your absolute dedication to standing up for your strong feelings and values and opinions, and I think the first public speaker said something about us being sick of it. It's not about that. You're welcome. His public comment is allowed in our council chambers by the Open Meetings Act. I'm not sick of it. I understand where you're coming from. It's just not the role for me to take on what you're asking me to do. So thank you for those who came this evening. I understand there's a few more signed up from people outside of this community. So with that, we'll move on. Next up is council referrals. We don't have any council referrals this evening. We actually don't have any reports to discuss either, so we go on to council comments. Any council comments this evening?
I actually do have some council comments. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, Happy Black History Month. Also, I wanted to also point out, actually, it was a Q&A that came in from Councilmember Chamberlain Kranga from Mr. Fagan, who lives on the Sussex Drive. And when I was actually campaigning, I did have a long conversation with him. And just kind of some background, he lives on an area that's an unpaved road, and there are a few neighborhoods in the city that are unpaved. And I know that, it's a concern. When they came before us, I think it was about a year or two ago, we kind of discussed possibly, the city potentially paving all the roads or developing some sort of plan. I know that we have a lot of competing budgetary issues, but I do want us to kind of keep that in mind because it will continue to come before us, various neighborhoods. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up as well.
I'll add on to that. We had talked about revising, or at least looking at, our special assessment district program. I know Assistant City Manager Schubert's not here this evening.
Well, but I can respond to that. We are ready to go into a study meeting to talk about revisions to the special assessment district policies, which go back to the early 60s. And, how much the city council today wants to pay towards the overall roads and the cost of that. So we're ready to do that, but, you have to select a city manager, and we have the budget coming up. And I'm not sure if we have the capacity to go into that study session, but we are prepared to do that at the earliest possible time that we can schedule it. It's going to have to be in the fall once we get through the summer vacation season, but we can do it earlier, but it may be without me.
Well, in the fall, it would be without you too, Mark.
Yeah.
So, well, that's fine. I think that Mr. Fagan's going to be, that neighborhood's expecting us to talk about, they may show up for budget conversations, because that was kind of what we had said when they were here. It's a budgetary issue. So I don't know, does it require a full study session, do you think? Is there anything that can be done in presentations and reports to start that process going, or does it need?
I think it really needs a study session, because City Council has to decide going forward how much commitment there should be on the homeowner's end, and how much of a financial commitment there is for the city to pay for. We have done we've collected data from our comparable communities so that we can look at what other communities do. And we just feel that it's time that be looked at and determined going forward and create a new policy. Like I said, the policy hasn't been changed in like 50 or 60 years.
Okay. I mean, I'm open to a study session, but I understand we're running out of slots for a study session. Councilmember Chamberlain Kranga?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have been in close contact with Mr. Fagan. So the way I remembered it is coming out of the advance, we agreed we need to have the study session first, go over, make a decision, and I have communicated that in so many words with Mr. Fagan. If there is a way to do it sooner than later, I personally would. I wish we could even do it around the budget, just because there is the expectation that somehow we're thinking, even if and we know we can't do this right away, and I've told Mr. Fagan, it may enter into a 6-year capital improvement plan. The council member Hamilton stated tonight, when you see us approving a road, that was probably decided 6 years ago as a part of an improvement plan. So Mr. Fagan is aware, but I think they just need to know that we're thinking of them, especially, right now, the dirt roads are they're pretty nasty right now in the winter. So if there is a way to do it sooner than later, I would like to do that to honor those residents.
Is there consensus to have city management propose potentially some opportunity dates for us?
Yes.
I mean, we'll add that to your plate, but I think it's
We're prepared and ready to go. Just need to schedule a date.
Okay. Well, we'll look for that then in a future agenda. Thank you. Any other council comments? Okay. Next up is public comment for items on or not on the agenda from members of the public outside of Troy, not residents of Troy, and not from Troy businesses. We have 3 people signed up this evening. First, same rules as earlier. So first up is Sarah Wynn Klein.
Good evening, City Council. Thank you for letting me speak today. I am a resident of Warren, Michigan. However, I have lived in Troy briefly in the past. I am also calling for a ceasefire today. I appreciate you trying to help us understand how it works within government, but I do want to state that I have been involved in this since October 7th, more specifically since, I would say, November 29th is when I first attended a meeting in Dearborn, actually. So I have spoken to members of federal government, and it really bothers me because when I started, it was about 15,000 people dead in Gaza. Now we're reaching 30,000, and I've watched it steadily increase, and I've watched most members of government do nothing. And so it's bothering me. I don't really know where else to turn. This is the second council that I've addressed with this. And so I beg that you put a ceasefire through. There are members of all communities around here. Warren, Dearborn has been great. I believe Detroit already passed a ceasefire. I think we need to unify so that the federal government sees what the people want, and we need your help. I'm appealing right now to your humanity. I would like to read a poem by Mossab Abu Toha. He is a Palestinian resident. He was displaced to Egypt with his family after being beaten. It's called "My Grandfather Was a Terrorist." My grandfather was a terrorist. He tended to his field. He watered roses in the courtyard, smoked cigarettes with grandmother on a yellow beach, lying there like a prayer rug. My grandfather was a terrorist. He picked oranges and lemons, went fishing with brothers until noon, sang a comforting song en route to the farmers with his piebald horse. My grandfather was a terrorist. He made a cup of tea with milk, sat on his verdant land as soft as silk. My grandfather was a terrorist. He departed his house, leaving it for the coming guests, left water on the table, his best, lest the guests die of thirst after their conquest. My grandfather was a terrorist. He walked to the closest safe town, empty as the sullen sky, vacant as a deserted tent, dark as a starless night. My grandfather was a terrorist. My grandfather was a man, a breadwinner for 10, whose luxury was to have a tent with a blue UN flag set to a rusting pole on the beach next to a cemetery. Please help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Christian Grant.
Sorry. My name is Christian, and I'm a Lansing resident. I was personally moved by the words of many of the residents here. I'm also calling for a ceasefire. In your explanations, you basically said, from my understanding, that this is an international issue, that there's a resolution before, that it's not as effective to go to local city council members, and that also it was an issue that divides members of the community. Certain members of the community feel ways on for or against it. But that, if my understanding is correct, would also apply to the Ukrainian support that this council gave. And if that is the council's standard on all things, it seems appropriate that they would remove their support for Ukraine. And if that is seen as abandoning the people of Ukraine or the people of Troy, then I would ask, why is that different for the people of Gaza and the people of Troy here supporting the people of Gaza? Also, finally, at the beginning of this meeting, everyone very solemnly was asked to stand as the last line of the invocation was that this council was working for a world of peace. And I believe that if that is a formality or that isn't true, then it's insulting to be asked that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Michael Kowalski.
Hello. So I know in 2023 in December in St. Clair Shores, there was a black lady at a Kroger who didn't have enough money on her bridge card. So she punched a Kroger employee in the face, who then fell onto the ground and hit her head on the linoleum. And that woman who punched her was charged with a simple misdemeanor of assault. And about a month ago or so at Somerset Mall in this city, a 10-year-old girl's head was slammed into a display by a black lady who was arrested the day after and charged with simple assault. I don't think simple assault against a child, a 10-year-old child, is effective enough of a deterrent against violently assaulting children. And I really don't understand why there's such a double standard for black people in their conduct. If I got to hear about socioeconomic differences and all these racial disparities, then one of these disparities that needs to be acknowledged is that black people are not held to the same standard of conduct exemplified by these examples. So I would call on you and your council to help support the police in effectively doing their job and assigning a charge that's actually commensurate with assaulting a 10-year-old girl, like a felony assault, or maybe since she wanted to giggle about it after doing it, maybe it could be a hate crime, like I got to hear every time a cop does his job. So that's what I got.
Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up for public comment for items on or not on the agenda for members of the public outside of Troy, not residents of Troy, and not from Troy businesses. We have no closed session this evening, so we're adjourned.